Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the debut grand opening of Mad Villain Bistro Bed and Breakfast Bar Grill.
I'm gonna address the controversy really quickly, as I need to, because there will be controversy both when the game is released and leading up to the months of the game, because obviously there's been a lot of controversy around violent video games, and this is gonna piss off a lot of people. But I don't really care. It's gonna be one of the best games ever made, and it's gonna be one of the best games of the year. And Cyberpunk 2077 comes out, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about what some people, some journalists, some quote-unquote gaming journalists have talked about. The first thing is that it provides violence, extreme gratuitous violence without context. They show a guy getting gutted, they show guts everywhere, they show a hanging. It's not necessarily pleasant to look at. And that's kind of the point. That's the point. It's a survival. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain this. It's kind of like explaining the joke, right? The whole point of the violence in the demos that we've seen is to let you know that the game is a violent video game. And that in this world that Ellie and Joel are in, there are great, horrible, and savage acts against humans. And Ellie and Joel, of course, are going to take part in these violent acts against these other people. The why, though, is the question. That's the context. But this is a violent world. What do you expect them to do? Have a pillow fight with each other and just play patty cake? No. There's rapists, there's murderers, there's cannibalists, and worse yet, there's clickers. Okay? Jesus Christ. And then on top of that, I know for a fact, there's probably gonna be some article coming out here or there saying that the game is going to be way too violent. It's going to have a violent protagonist that descends into chaos, exactly like how the media is portraying the Joker movie currently. So I'm going to play Joaquin Phoenix, his take on the whole violence in media, and then we'll talk about the game.
I don't think it's the responsibility of a filmmaker to teach the audience morality or the difference between right or wrong. I mean, to me, I think that's obvious. I think if you have somebody that has that level of emotional disturbance, I think that they can find fuel anywhere. And so I just don't think that you can function that way. I mean, the truth is, you don't know what is going to be the fuel for somebody, and it might very well be your question. It might be this moment, right? But you can't function in life saying, well, I can't ask that question for the small chance that somebody might be affected by that question, right? I wouldn't ask you to do that, right? I wouldn't ask you to censor yourself. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for all of us. I think we all are aware of these issues and we're concerned, and I think that's why we talk about it. And I don't think that we can be afraid to talk about it.
And these developers try to take like already created amazing game concepts that don't need to be completely changed, but try to take and alter them to be different anyway, and just end up making things trash, bro. Like, but anyways, what they should do, in my opinion, is taking those already great concepts and build on them, and like turn them into something more advanced and fun. Like continually building up on the foundation of a house and turning it into a mansion with renovations. That's how I think developers should like look at games now.
This is a special game. So this is gonna be a special video. I'm really going to only have a couple of points that I'm gonna talk through and talk about. And then we'll kind of just go about our day, and I'll end the video and you'll go your way and I'll go my way and we'll end off happy. All right, that's how we're gonna have it. So The first thing about the game that I'm going to talk about is, like Daquan mentioned in the clip that I played you before, this is a mansion. Naughty Dog has made the mansion. They understand how to make games, right? This isn't a struggling developer. This isn't an indie trying to go to AAA. This is an established developer, all right? They know how to make games. They did it back in, I think, 2006, 2007 with the first Uncharted. Then they continued forward with Uncharted 2. Then they continued forward even more with Uncharted 3. Once they got to The Last of Us, they already knew how to create an atmosphere, how to create a theme, what they wanted to do. They had a new idea. Let's create a survival horror game with a strong narrative. That's what The Last of Us is. Don't get it twisted. It is a survival horror game with a strong narrative. That's how I would describe it in one sentence. There's no more, there's no lack, there's no fuss, there's no must, that's it. So when you think of The Last of Us Part 2 and you think of all of the games that came before it, what do you think of it now? It's a mansion with renovations. It has a lot of the things that we saw in the first Last of Us added on and continued in the second game. And the first thing that we'll talk about today is, we'll talk about that sweet combat. You're always going to be at a disadvantage in The Last of Us Part 2. You're always going to be on a limited supply of guns and ammunition. The guns that you'll have, the ammunition, the upgrades, the skills that you'll have, it's never going to be enough. You'll never have enough scrap to craft items with. You'll never have enough medication. You'll never have enough. You're starving all the time in The Last of Us Part 2. The dangerous parts of the game, especially with the combat, aren't going to be the parts that you can see. It's not going to be the 5 to 10 people that you'll see, in a hideout or in a street. It's always going to be the ones that you can't see. The ones that are the looming threats over the horizon that you know are going to be at the end of the level. A group of clickers after you've taken on a group of militia. It's going to be a group of humans waiting to ambush you after you have dealt with the clickers. It may be a boss battle at the end. It may be a combination of the two. But all I know is The Last of Us always presents that looming threat on the horizon, and it's always going to affect your gameplay. Because how you take on that first group of enemies is going to dictate how you take on that second group. You may have in the demo, Ellie doesn't have a lot of shots in her pistol, and she gets gashed for it. She gets shot with an arrow for it. She almost goes down. She gets another girl. She points her gun at the other girl like she's threatening. She knows she doesn't have any ammo in the gun. But Ellie has to do that to survive. Ellie has to do that to make sure that she can continue to go on in the level, in the game. And you will have to do that while playing as Ellie. But that's just some of the combat. That's just some of the combat aspects that you know, of course, because you probably played The Last of Us. I want to talk about the horror of surviving in The Last of Us Part 2. To elaborate even more on the point that I made earlier about how the context of the violence is obviously to showcase how brutal the world is, even further, there's a lot of these scenes. There was the 2017 Paris Games News Week, whatever it was called, where they showed these horrific bodies. They showed these bodies being hung up and mutilated and their intestines are spilling out. Just a terrible scene. And you see, I think it kind of looked like Ellie. I don't know. I don't think it was. It didn't sound like her, but you saw a woman being hung and about to essentially have what was happening to the other people about to be done to her. And you see a woman coming out and and they break her arm and something and a boy comes out and he's shooting arrows in the darkness and he saves them all and they're about to fend off a pack of clickers and the demo ends. And then that's further elaborated on with the 2018 demo where Ellie is witnessing one of these kind of just de-gutting. They're shoving a knife through a guy. I don't get the purpose of hanging a dude and then cutting out his stomach. I don't know. Just a weird scene to me. Very, very disturbing regardless. But why are they showing you this? Because apparently people have to spoon feed other people easy to understand information. The whole reason why they're showing you this is they are like you are Ellie. You are in her shoes. You are playing from her perspective. And her perspective is the perspective of someone who is infiltrating a dangerous environment. And to showcase how dangerous that environment is, Naughty Dog shows you the links that these men and women, because there are women, as much as people like to say, oh my god, only violence happens to women in video games. Even though the guy being hung is a man. But they're showing you this horrible act to show you how terrible the situation is for Ellie. That she's willing to risk a whole lot to get to whatever she's trying to do, to get to wherever she's trying to go, to do whatever she's trying to do. She is risking a whole lot. And that violence, that small act, it feeds into the narrative.
Beside the still waters, and they restore my soul, but I can't walk on the path of the right because I'm wrong. No, I can't walk on the path of the right 'cause I'm...
They are rusted with sin. What is free?
A lot of people get this confused about the best games. A lot of people get that a lot of people fall into that trap of cutscenes. They tell the narrative of a game. Cutscenes are the things that are going to showcase why a game is great, when they're missing the point. The whole point of why a game has a great story isn't the actual cutscenes itself, it's the gameplay. When Geralt finds Ciri, you understand his struggle. You understand what he's had to go through, disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. Having to go from Velen to Novigrad, all the way to Skellige. He doesn't find her, but he gets a tip, and that tip, it leads to something bad. I won't try to spoil it for you, and I'm a little bit foggy on the story anyways. But Geralt goes through all of this turmoil, all of this failure to find Ciri, and when he finds Ciri, presumably dead, for the first time, I think ever, you see Geralt in a severe emotional state. He's a Witcher. He's been purged of his emotions until Ciri is revitalized. And all of that work, all of that effort that you as the player and he as Geralt have put into the search is now worth it because of that one moment. But that moment would never have been, the weight of that moment would never have been able, I can articulate it in 100,000 different ways, but I would not be able to explain to you how important that moment is and was unless you play the game. The same thing goes for Kratos and Atreus spreading Faye's ashes on the highest peak in all the realms. How important that was for Geralt and Atreus. And for Faye, of course. Not just for them to understand who she was as a person and who Kratos and Atreus are and what they're probably going to do in the next couple of years. And when they release her ashes, you can see that they've been through a lot. Kratos reveals who he is, the god of war, the ghost of Sparta. Son of Zeus, killed his own dad, killed his own father. To his son Atreus, who's hating himself because he is hating gods and he is half of a god because Kratos is half of a god. Technically, Atreus is like a quarter of a god. But Atreus hates that quarter of himself. And Kratos tells him who he is and he shows him that he was in bondage by Ares, the original god of war. And all of that comes to a moment where Kratos just lets go and he releases. And I can't explain to you that impact of the story. I cannot explain to you how impactful that part of the game was unless you play the game. And the same thing goes with The Last of Us Part 2. I cannot explain to you how impactful The Last of Us's story was unless you play it. Unless you understand Joel and Ellie's struggle fully by playing the game. I can't explain it to you. I can't explain to you their struggle, why they're doing the things that they're doing, and the moments, the impact of their moments will have further going into the game. But we'll know soon enough on February 21st, 2020. You know, I don't really care how wrong I'm gonna be here. I really, really don't. I've been wrong before. I'm not gonna let that affect my statements. I think this is gonna be one of the best games of next year. I think this is going to be one of the best games of all time and on the PS4 for certain. And if anything is said about the PS5, that is true. That this console will be able to play former titles on the PS4, like Spider-Man and hopefully The Last of Us Part 2. It's going to already have one of the best libraries a gaming console has ever had in the entire history of gaming. This is an event. 2020 is going to be one hell of a year, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you own especially if you own a PS4, because you now get to buy a console that's better improved, that's has better technology, and you can play all of your PS4 titles on it. But most importantly, guess what? If you're a PS4 owner, you get Cyberpunk 2077. And now you get The Last of Us Part 2 in the same year. This year, next year, 2020, it may be better than 2018, where Red Dead Redemption 2, God of War, Spider-Man, yeah, those games, all of those games came out last year. And next year, because of The Last of Us Part 2 and Cyberpunk 2077, 2020 may be one of the best gaming years of all time. We'll have to wait and see, 2020, if it's going to be a great year.